Have you ever wondered why extraordinarily beautiful women, those who seem to have it all, end up in dysfunctional relationships, chaotic emotional choices, and an almost pathological inability to maintain healthy bonds? It's not a coincidence, nor is it bad luck, nor is it solely the fault of men or society. What happens to these women is much deeper, darker, and at the same time more predictable than you might imagine. Because what seems like a gift, stunning beauty, is actually the beginning of a brutal disconnect from reality. It's hard to see this from the outside. After all, she is admired, praised, desired. She has access, influence, doors that open with a smile. But what no one sees is the invisible price that this beauty demands: the systematic extinction of truth. From the moment she becomes desirable, she stops hearing what she needs to hear. She becomes spared from reality, protected from feedback, wrapped in a universe where everything revolves around pleasing, attracting, conquering, never confronting, challenging, or transforming. There is no bad faith in this, only logic. The system is corrupt because the incentives are inverted. Being truthful with a beautiful woman usually comes at a very high cost: loss of access, rejection, rupture. Being conniving, saying what she wants to hear, reinforcing her worldview, however illusory it may be, usually has quick rewards: attention, validation, perhaps sex. So men, even the most ethical ones, learn early on that in this game, the truth does not pay dividends. And so she grows up in a world where what is said is never what is real, where what seems to be is not, and where what should be a warning becomes applause. This phenomenon is not isolated. It starts early, often in adolescence. At 13 or 14, she realizes that her body has an impact that her mind does not yet understand. Adults treat her differently. Strangers smile for no reason. Glances follow her down the street. What should be just a physical awakening becomes a transfer of power. But power without preparation is just chaos delayed. She is emotionally a child with the seduction button activated, and the world, instead of guiding her, decides to exploit her. Since then, every conversation she has with a man is a negotiation, and the rule is simple: those who agree stay, those who disagree disappear. This creates a reverse engineering of affection. Instead of attracting with her soul, she learns to seduce with her image. Instead of being challenged, she is pampered. Instead of being corrected, she is idolized. The result? A woman who grows up on the outside but remains childish on the inside, who accumulates stories but not wisdom, who lives relationships but does not build real intimacy. Have you noticed how some incredibly intelligent women, with brilliant educations, solid careers, and social recognition, stumble almost pathetically in their romantic choices? It's as if they were geniuses at work but emotionally illiterate in bed. The reason is clear. Their achievements were shaped by systems based on merit, effort, and results. But in relationships, where appearance rules the game, the logic is different. And where there is no honest feedback, there is no evolution. That's why, even as adults, these women make emotional decisions like spoiled teenagers. They idealize men, test boundaries, dramatize conflicts, run away from discomfort, and blame others for their unhappiness. Not out of malice, but because of programming. They have been trained to do so, conditioned like lab rats to seek rewards and avoid truths. They no longer know how to differentiate between frustration and disrespect. Nor do they understand that the man who says no is often the only one who really cares. This man, however, is easily discarded. He doesn't play the game. He doesn't flatter. He doesn't perform. He doesn't validate the delusion. For this reason, he is mistaken for arrogance or coldness. Meanwhile, the manipulators, the weak, and the flatterers remain and reinforce the cycle of self-deception. The result is tragic. She begins to collect relationships that start with euphoria and end in resentment, repeatedly, like an actress who always plays the same scene hoping for a different ending. The great irony is that, meanwhile, ordinary women, those who have experienced rejection, who have heard hard truths, who have had to learn to conquer beyond their appearance, develop something that the beautiful rarely have: emotional maturity. They know how to lose, give in, recalibrate. Because they were educated by the real world, not by a theater of continuous seduction. And that, over time, becomes a decisive advantage. After all, beauty fades, but awareness flourishes. So when you see a stunning woman who lives in emotional turmoil, understand, she is not stupid. She is just intoxicated. She has lived for years in a desert of truths, where every compliment was poison disguised as honey. And until she makes the courageous move to break this cycle, she will continue to seek in men what she can only find in herself: discernment, humility, and truth. There is no cure without confrontation, and there is no confrontation without pain. But there is also no growth without both. If she really wants to step out of the role of muse and live as a whole woman, she will need to let go of the need to be adored in order to finally be understood. She will need to renounce the certainty of being right in order to embrace the chance to be alive. Because in the end, it's not about beauty, it's about awareness. She is not lying when she says she values truth. She believes it. But what she calls truth is, almost always, only that which confirms the world she has built for herself so as not to go mad. A world where her beauty is also her moral compass, where the validation she receives is confused with love, and where any confrontation with reality sounds like cruelty. The problem isn't with her, but with the environment that shaped her. It's an environment where beauty acts as a silent spell, a gravitational field that distorts not only men's behavior, but also women's own perception of who they are, and what it really means to be loved. It is not cruelty, it is survival. Men do not lie because they are wicked. They lie because they have learned that telling the truth is too costly. They lie because in a world where appearance governs desire, honesty has become a devalued currency. They lie because they realized, even as teenagers, that saying what she wants to hear opens doors. Saying what she needs to hear closes them all. This imbalance, repeated over the years, generates a chain of consequences that goes far beyond failed relationships. We are talking about a perceptual collapse, a gap between who she thinks she is and how the world really works. It is what psychology calls intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes she hears the truth and explodes. Sometimes she is ignored and resents it. But almost always the men around her choose to reinforce her distorted beliefs because it brings them closer, even if only momentarily, to what they desire. Validation has become language. And like all language, it shapes reality. The extremely beautiful woman comes to live in an ecosystem where mistakes are not corrected, but glossed over, where dysfunction is not confronted, but massaged. And in this world of mirrors, any attempt at lucidity sounds like a personal attack. After all, who dares to contradict the princess crowned by biology itself? This is the point where tragedy takes hold. When the feedback system collapses, there is no more learning. And without learning, there is no evolution. She continues to make decisions about love, affection, and partnership based on beliefs that have never been tested. Because the men who could challenge her prefer the comfort of lies to the discomfort of truth. Because every attempt at lucidity is received as hostility. Because beauty, in this case, has become a shield against emotional growth. And like every shield, it also isolates. The beautiful woman, without knowing it, has been exiled from reality. And this exile is reinforced by men who, even if well-intentioned, prefer to keep up the charade rather than face the risk of saying, "You are wrong." And if no one says it, she doesn't change. And if she doesn't change, she repeats. And if she repeats, she fails. And if she fails, she seeks comfort in the same discourses that keep her blind. This is what we call a negative feedback loop. Every relationship that ends badly reinforces the idea that men are no good. Every frustration reinforces the belief that she is a victim of a world that does not know how to value her. And every new attempt at connection begins with the same mistakes that led her to the previous abyss. Ordinary women, those who have not received the same kind of aesthetic validation throughout their lives, experience a different kind of suffering. But they also have an advantage. They were exposed to the harsh truth at an early age. They were confronted with rejection, criticism, and limitations. They were forced to develop social skills, emotional sensitivity, and self-knowledge. They received less applause, but more reality. And it is this reality that, over time, offers them a more accurate compass. They do not navigate seas of delirium. They know that love requires effort, that affection is not a bargaining chip, that beauty attracts, but does not sustain. The beautiful woman, on the other hand, drowned in applause since she was 14, believes that just showing up is enough, that the right man will appear, enchanted, ready to adore her image. She doesn't realize that the image is just the invitation. What sustains the relationship is something else, and that is something she was never forced to develop. After all, there has always been someone willing to tolerate the unbearable in exchange for closeness. There has always been someone who, even in the face of destructive behavior, chose silence. This is where the figure of the honest man emerges. A father, a brother, a friend who does not desire her body, but her clarity. A man who has something more valuable to lose than sex, his self-respect. When this man appears, he tries to break the cycle. He says what she doesn't want to hear. He shows her what she refuses to see. But he is almost always ignored, ridiculed, or pushed away. Because the truth at this stage has already become unbearable. And at this point, the collapse is already underway. The truth is that beauty, when not accompanied by emotional structure, becomes a curse. And the more intense the beauty, the more powerful the curse. Because it masks everything. Because it convinces the woman herself that reality must bend at her feet. And when that doesn't happen, she doesn't rethink her path. She accuses the world of betrayal. She blames men. She curses love. But it's not about blame. It's about structure. What failed was not the character of these women, but the system that surrounded them with lies from an early age. A system where every compliment was a disguise, where every validation was a trap, where every silence in the face of destructive behavior was in practice a condemnation to emotional failure. This woman is not a villain. She is a victim of a society that sexualizes early, idealizes quickly, and abandons soon after. A victim of men who prefer immediate pleasure to transformative truth. A victim of a culture that rewards appearance but punishes depth. And the price of this is devastating. Because one day, even the most beautiful woman will see her reflection change. And if everything she has built was based on image, what will remain when that image loses its power? What is left when beauty stops opening doors, but the inner emptiness remains locked inside? That's when despair sets in. When she realizes that smiles don't last, that applause ceases, that invitations dwindle. And in that silence, maybe, just maybe, she begins to hear something new. Something that has always been there, but has been buried by decades of lies. The whisper of truth, not as punishment, but as a way out. And it is precisely at this point of ruin that the possibility of reconstruction begins, but only for those who have the courage to cross the mirror. Because the pain of disillusionment is also the pain of awakening, and those who cannot bear this crossing will be condemned to repeat beauty as a prison, not as a bridge. There are silent forms of insanity that do not appear in reports or diagnoses, but reveal themselves in everyday life. In the repetition of romantic failures, in complaints that return with different names and identical pains. The beautiful woman, raised in an ecosystem of gentle lies and absent truths, lives one of these forms. She is not crazy, but she has been trained to believe in a version of the world that does not exist. And when reality insists on showing another face, she calls it injustice, never illusion. This illusion has a technical name: wisdom disaster, a collapse between the power one has and the wisdom one never developed. And the greater the power, red beauty, influence, magnetism, the more severe the collapse. Because the world ceases to be a mirror and becomes a stage. And on a stage, the audience offers no feedback, only applause. But no applause teaches. No look of desire conveys limits. No compliment corrects character. The girl who became a woman under constant spotlight never had the chance to learn what others learned through rejection, invisibility, and the effort to be seen beyond the body. The average person learned early on that charisma requires substance. That connection demands listening. That love is a two-way street. The beautiful, on the other hand, heard for decades that it was enough to simply exist, that their presence was enough, that their existence was already an offering. But time is cruel to those who build their identity on shifting sand. One day, the most beautiful faces become commonplace. Curves lose their power to paralyze rooms. And the gaze, once omnipotent, no longer moves mountains. And it is at this moment, when the world demands more than beauty, that the woman who never learned to love begins to crumble inside, because she doesn't know how to connect without seducing. She doesn't know how to listen without controlling. She doesn't know how to be without pleasing. Psychology calls this individuation deficit, the inability to recognize oneself as a separate self from the expectations of others. The woman who was admired for her appearance from an early age confuses herself with admiration, and when it ceases, emptiness remains. Not just any emptiness, but an abyss formed by years of external validation and a lack of internal construction. It is at this point that destructive decisions arise, relationships where she tries to control the other person with the same spell she used at 20, disproportionate emotional demands, existential crises masked as empowerment. And the tragedy is that even now she continues to listen to lies. Only this time they are more refined. The lies of superficial self-help, of ready-made speeches that say, "You are perfect just the way you are." Perfect? No one is. And to believe that is to prevent any possibility of transformation. True self-love begins when you accept what needs to be changed, not when you idolize what is corrupt. Men do not escape this dynamic. Those who orbit around beautiful women also become ill. Many lose their authenticity. They adjust their values to fit her desires. They live in eternal hope of approval. And in doing so, they reinforce the system of lies that imprisons them as well. They become accomplices to the illusion that hurts them. They lose their virility, not in the sexual sense, but in their ability to uphold the truth even in the face of the risk of rejection. The collapse is twofold. She loses the chance to become whole. They lose the chance to become true. And everyone loses the chance to experience something worthy of being called love. Because real love requires deconstruction. It requires discomfort. It requires confronting the other firmly, and at the same time, sustaining the bond with tenderness. But this is impossible when beauty is used as a currency of emotional control. There is a way out, but it is brutal. There is no way to access lucidity without first going through the pain of realizing that it was all a well-intentioned lie. That relationships failed because the rules she followed were wrong. That the problem was never a lack of good men, but the inability to recognize them. Because men who tell the truth do not shine like those who flatter. They are uncomfortable, they seem rude, they sound cruel, but they are the only ones capable of saving a woman from the abyss that her beauty has dug. To do this, she needs to re-educate her senses, learn to differentiate criticism from attack, frustration from rejection, love from adoration. She needs to build a new emotional architecture from scratch, one that is capable of embracing reality as an ally, not as a threat. This requires tearing up the script, undoing the persona, killing the character that was fed by likes, compliments, and empty invitations. Above all, it requires courage. The same courage that men need to resist the temptation to lie, to say no, to walk away when they realize they are being manipulated, to sustain the discomfort of the truth even in the face of the risk of losing what they desire. These men are rare, but they are necessary. They are the ones who, even when discarded, plant seeds of lucidity. They are the ones who break the cycle. And you, who have come this far, may be one of those men. Or perhaps one of those women who are beginning to realize that beauty is not enough. That without depth, no reflection can sustain a bond. That without truth, all passion becomes illusion. If this text confronted you, challenged you, or made you reflect, it is because it spoke to the part of you that still thirsts for reality. So enjoy the video, subscribe to the channel, And if you feel that this message deserves to continue to exist, contribute with a donation of any amount. In the comments, write, "Unshakable consciousness." That is the password. A sign that you are not here just to be entertained, but to evolve. Because beauty will one day fade. But consciousness, that is what transforms everything.